They said the desert forgives nothing. But I still walk its spine every night, flashlight trembling against the sand, counting footsteps that shouldn't be there. I used to believe my badge meant mercy, that guiding a few frightened families past the floodlights was the least a man could do, a kindness between borders. Then one night, the wind carried gunfire instead of prayers. The smugglers used my route. My partner didn't make it back. Since then, every dawn feels like a confession I can't finish. The border fence keeps rising, higher and higher, but guilt always finds a hole to crawl through. Now I work security at a church near El Paso. People still cross, not fences anymore, but thresholds, and I stand there, watching, wondering which side of forgiveness I'm really on. My name's Daniel Reyes, 42 years old, born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, raised between desert wind and diner grease. My father was a mechanic who fixed engines for both Border Patrol trucks and the very men those trucks were chasing. "Business is business," he used to say, hands blackened with oil, eyes never looking up from the carburetor. I guess that's where I learned neutrality, that strange comfort of standing in the middle and pretending it's peace. When I joined the U.S. Border Patrol, I told myself I was doing it for stability. Good pay, health insurance, and a clean pension plan. My wife, Maria, was pregnant with our first son then. I wanted to bring order to a land made of dust and rumors. I thought I could be one of the good ones, the kind who spoke Spanish softly to frightened families, who handed out water instead of cuffs. At first, the job had rhythm. Sunrise briefings, long drives past the Rio Grande, the crackle of the radio. There's a strange beauty in the monotony, miles of barbed wire glittering like a rosary under the heat. You start to believe that control equals virtue, that scanning the horizon is a kind of prayer. Then, reality starts to whisper between the static. You see the same faces night after night, mothers with trembling hands, boys carrying their sisters, men with nothing but plastic bottles and hope. They run, you chase. They fall, you detain. You start to dream their faces, only in daylight this time. One night, around 2 a.m., I found a family hiding behind a rusted pickup truck. A man, a woman, and a girl who couldn't have been older than 6. The father begged in broken English, "Please, sir, she is sick. Just water." I gave them my canteen, told them to head east where the fence broke near the arroyo. It wasn't policy, but it was human. And once you taste the power of mercy, it's hard to go back to the handbook. That night changed something in me. After that, I started seeing the fence differently. Not as a line of defense, but as a confession written in metal. We weren't protecting borders. We were protecting the illusion that mercy could be regulated. My partner back then was Eli Turner, ex-Marine, clean-cut, never missed a report. The kind who polished his badge every morning like it was communion. He used to call me preacher because I'd quote scripture on patrol, small verses about compassion and forgiveness. He said, half laughing, "You keep this up, Reyes, and they'll send you to the clergy, not the field." I didn't know then how close he'd be to right. Eli and I worked the same route near Sunland Park, a quiet zone at first, but word spreads fast across both sides. The smugglers, coyotes, started using the same trails we patrolled, the ones I thought were safe for the desperate. They carried more than people: drugs, guns, debt, death. And still, part of me believed I was helping, That by letting a few families through, I was balancing some cosmic scale, paying off America's old sins, one crossing at a time. Maria didn't know the details, just that I came home later and later. She said I smelled of sand and silence. Our boy, Mateo, once asked why I carried 2 radios. I told him, one for orders, one for prayers. He laughed. I didn't. The more I helped them cross, the heavier my badge felt. You start to rationalize. Maybe God understands. Maybe laws are man-made and mercy isn't. But mercy, I learned, can turn into pride disguised as kindness. The belief that you're the only one who knows what's right. There's a kind of dusk in this work. Not the sunset kind, but the moral one, where light doesn't disappear all at once. It just thins. One evening, Eli and I were sitting in the truck, sipping burnt coffee, the scanner hissing static. He looked out toward the darkening hills and said, "You ever wonder if we're saving them or saving ourselves?" I said, "Both, maybe. Maybe that's enough." He nodded, and for a moment I thought he understood. But he didn't know about the families I'd quietly waved past the checkpoint. Not yet. Later that week, Command received intel. Smugglers were using a new gap east of our patrol. Eli and I were assigned to investigate. I didn't say anything, because I knew that route. I'd made that route. That's the night everything began to tilt. I remember the desert's silence, thick as guilt. The air smelled of gun oil and creosote. I kept my flashlight low, tracing the footprints I'd once led. Somewhere ahead, the shadows moved wrong. Then came the crack, a single shot, echoing off the rocks. When I found Eli, he was already down, eyes open, mouth still trying to form my name. The smugglers vanished into the brush, and all I could think of was that family, the one I'd helped. Did they tell someone? Did my mercy mark the path that killed him? They said it was an ambush. I said nothing. Silence was easier to confess than truth. That night, I drove home, parked outside the house, and couldn't go in. Maria's light was still on. The baby monitor buzzed faintly through the window. Inside that house was innocence. Outside was me. I lit a cigarette, though I hadn't smoked in years. The flame shook in the wind, like it was afraid to burn. "You tried to do good," I whispered to myself. "So why does it feel like sin?" The desert didn't answer. It never does. After the shooting, they gave me 2 weeks off. Administrative leave, they called it. Paperwork for grief. But grief doesn't sign forms. It lingers in the smell of your clothes, in the sound of the radio static you still hear while brushing your teeth. Maria wanted to take Mateo to her mother's in Albuquerque for a while. "You need quiet," she said. Quiet. That's all the desert ever gave me. For days, I drove the same patrol routes out of habit. No badge, no uniform, just an old shirt and a pair of boots still dusted with Eli's blood. I told myself I needed closure. But truthfully, I just needed to make sense of mercy. I stopped at the arroyo near Sunland Park, the one with the gap. The sand still remembered footprints, faded now, swept halfway by the wind. Somewhere beyond that ridge, a little girl might have lived because of me. Somewhere else, Eli died because of me. I tried to convince myself that the first outweighed the second. But that's the first temptation, the arithmetic of guilt. A week later, I met Father Luis, the parish priest at a small church near Socorro. I'd gone there to light a candle for Eli. The church was empty, the air thick with incense. Luis wore the kind of calm that makes you suspicious. "You're Border Patrol," he said, glancing at the way I stood. "Was," I corrected. He smiled. "No one ever stops being what they were, Daniel." We talked about faith, about the desert, about forgiveness that never feels finished. He told me the church ran a small aid program for migrant families: food, blankets, sometimes safe transport. Nothing illegal, at least not in intention. Compassion can't wait for permits, he said. That line hit me like scripture. Soon I started volunteering there. I told myself it was therapy. I stacked food boxes, handed out water bottles, prayed with tired hands that looked too young for their scars. I didn't ask where they came from. They didn't ask what I'd done. Then one night, Father Luis pulled me aside. "There's a family stranded in the desert," he said. "They trusted the wrong guide. They'll die out there." I stared at him. "You want me to just guide them through? You know the paths better than anyone." I should have said no, but that word's heavy when mercy calls itself duty. We left after sundown. The desert stretched out like a body too large to bury. I drove a church van loaded with water jugs and blankets. Halfway through the trail, I saw them. 4 figures huddled under the moonlight, a mother clutching her baby, 2 men half-starved and limping. The moment they saw me, they froze. Fear is universal. I could see it in their eyes before I even stepped out. "Tranquilos," I said. "I'm here to help." They didn't believe me, not at first. Then the woman spoke, barely a whisper. "Dios te mandó." God sent you. Those words, they filled a hole I didn't know I'd been digging. By dawn, I'd guided them past the fence, through a dry creek bed that still carried my old tire tracks. I dropped them near a safe house run by a nun Father Luis knew. Before leaving, the woman pressed something into my hand. A small wooden rosary, worn smooth by sweat and faith. "For your son," she said. I watched them disappear into the horizon, and for the first time since Eli's death, I felt alive. Not righteous, but needed. That feeling, that's temptation's favorite mask. After that, word spread quietly among the congregation. El agente que ayuda, the agent who helps. At first, it was just a few families. Then came more. Calls at midnight, notes slipped into pews, a whispered name at confession. Each time I told myself, just this once. But once is how every sin begins. I learned how to avoid patrol drones, how to time the floodlights, how to read the rhythm of the night watch. I stopped wearing my old badge, but I still carried it. A reminder that good men can trespass too. I started accepting small tokens from those I helped. Not money, never at first. A handmade cross, a letter of thanks, a photo of a child smiling in front of a church in Phoenix. Then one night, a man offered cash. "For gas," he said. I refused. The next time, I didn't. You tell yourself it's harmless, that mercy needs fuel too. Maria noticed the changes before I did. "You're gone every night," she said. "You don't even look at Mateo anymore." "I'm working," I lied. "At what?" I didn't answer. She turned away, her shoulders tense, like she was bracing for a storm she couldn't see. "Daniel," she said finally, "you're trying to save everyone except yourself. But when you've built your identity on compassion, you'll do anything not to feel cruel, even if it means lying to the one person who still sees you as human." I kept helping. Each trip felt heavier, yet more addictive. Sometimes, in the glow of my flashlight, I'd see Eli's face flicker on the sand, his eyes asking a question I still refused to answer. The church became my base of operations. Father Luis never asked for details, and I never gave them. He thought we were just saving lives. Maybe he knew more than he admitted. Maybe that was his own kind of faith. Or denial. Once, a group of men came through. Not families this time, but young, cold-eyed, quiet. They said they were farm workers headed north. One of them carried a backpack that clinked when he moved. I should have checked it. I didn't. Weeks later, Border Patrol reports flooded in. Narcotics discovered near Alamogordo. Same trail, same gap. My gap. I started to panic. Maybe I'd been helping smugglers all along. I confronted Father Luis. "You said they were families." "Most are," he said softly, "but not all." Mercy doesn't vet paperwork. That night, I sat in my truck under the desert sky, the radio silent for once. I thought about Eli, about the woman who gave me the rosary, about my son, who still thought his father worked to keep people safe. The lines blurred until they disappeared. Law, faith, mercy, survival. I was no longer sure which side of the border I was on. Temptation doesn't always come with music or women or money. Sometimes it comes dressed as good intentions. A man convincing himself he's on God's side while crossing his own commandments. I started keeping a journal, notes about each crossing. The names I remembered, the ones I didn't, the dates, the weather. I told myself it was for accountability, but it became a scripture of delusion. The entries began to sound like prayers. Tonight, 2 saved. The girl made it. Eli would understand. But he wouldn't. I was rewriting theology for my own comfort. Then came the night of the convoy. 3 vans, 20 people, maybe more. They said it was urgent. A cartel war had erupted near Juarez, and entire families were fleeing. I led them through the old trail near the hills, headlights off, trusting the moon. Halfway across, one of the vans stalled. I stepped out to help. The engine was cold, too cold. That's when I saw the men in the back, armed. Not refugees. Smugglers. Before I could react, one of them said, "Keep driving, Agent. You know the way." They knew who I was. That meant others did too. My secret mercy had turned into currency. I wasn't saving lives anymore. I was paving roads for killers. When we reached the crossing, I dropped them at the other side, pretending I hadn't seen the weapons, pretending ignorance was innocence. But as I watched their taillights fade into the desert, I realized I had built the same path that killed Eli. Again. The next morning, Maria found me on the porch, staring at the rosary. "You look like you're praying," she said. "I'm trying to remember who I was," I whispered. She touched my arm. Then start by telling the truth. But confession, I thought, was for the living. And I wasn't sure which side of that I was on anymore. That evening, I drove to the church to speak with Father Luis. I found the doors open, candles still burning. Inside, a group of women were kneeling in prayer. One of them turned, the same woman I'd helped months ago, the one who gave me the rosary. She smiled faintly, and beside her was her daughter, alive, healthy, clutching a small Bible. For a moment, Mercy felt clean again. Then I noticed a man in the corner, one of the smugglers from the convoy, his eyes locked on me, cold and certain. He walked out before I could move. That night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You keep helping. We keep silent. That's how good intentions become leverage. From then on, I lived two lives. By day, the grieving officer on leave, attending counseling, helping the church. By night, the shadow broker of crossings, pretending I could control chaos with compassion. Every time I heard a report of gunfire along the fence, I froze, wondering if I'd drawn the map again. The line wasn't a border anymore. It was my conscience, split wide open. Temptation had turned into theology, and theology into sin. But I couldn't stop. Not because I needed the money, not even because I felt noble, because stopping meant facing what mercy had cost. When Father Luis later asked why I looked so hollow, I told him, because I've been forgiven too many times to believe in forgiveness. He didn't answer, just handed me a Bible and said, then start over. Even the desert blooms again after fire. But I'd seen the desert burn before, and I knew some fires don't purify. They just light the way deeper into the dark. The desert at night became my cathedral. No hymns, no choir, just the hum of engines, the chorus of tires cutting through dust, and the pulse that told me I was alive. Every trip was a sermon in motion, headlights carving halos into the sand, mercy rewritten as speed. They said adrenaline is just guilt wearing perfume. Maybe that's true. Because after every crossing, I'd sit in the dark, breath shallow, heart racing. Not from fear, but from feeling needed again. I told myself this was penance, that saving one family made up for another lost soul. But soon I wasn't counting families, I was counting runs. One night, one of the coyotes, Ramiro, offered me whiskey after a crossing. For your nerves, he said. His teeth glowed under the moonlight, gold on gray. I drank, and the burn felt like absolution. Next time it was cash, then a phone, then a promise. Mercy had become commerce, and I was both client and supplier. I stopped volunteering at the church. The hymns made my hands shake. Every time Father Luis looked at me, I thought I saw understanding, the kind that doesn't forgive. So I kept driving. Nights blurred into each other, the same sand, the same stars, the same sin. I started to like the danger, the thrill of it, the feeling of being untouchable. The coyotes began calling me El Santo, the saint. They thought it was a joke. Maybe it was. But when I heard it, something inside me smiled. You don't notice corruption when it wears your own name. It got darker, louder, more real. Sometimes I'd drive with music blasting, drowning out memory. Spanish ballads, border songs, Eli's old playlist on the radio. One night, halfway through a run, the song El Paso came on. The one about a cowboy dying for love. I laughed out loud, nearly hysterical. Because love and guilt are the same song in different languages. After that, I stopped turning the music off. I started taking different trails, ones I'd sworn were too dangerous before. The desert doesn't warn you, it just watches. I memorized the patterns of patrol drones, the timing of checkpoints, the weak links in fences I once guarded. Every time I crossed a family, I told them to keep praying. Every time I crossed a criminal, I told myself I couldn't tell the difference. That's the thing about decay. It's not a collapse, it's a comfort. Maria began sleeping in the guest room. She didn't argue anymore, she just stopped asking. One morning, she left a note on the kitchen table. Mercy shouldn't make you cruel. I stared at it until the ink started to blur. Then I folded it and placed it in my pocket next to the rosary, both burned like evidence. Mateo barely spoke to me now. He was 9, old enough to sense ghosts, too young to name them. A month later, the smugglers upgraded, bigger trucks, heavier cargo. I was no longer guiding people, I was guiding shipments. I told myself I didn't know what was inside the crates, but deep down I did. It wasn't mercy anymore, it was muscle memory. One night, we stopped for gas near a closed diner. Ramiro handed me a stack of bills, thick, rubber-banded, uncounted. For the saint, he said, you've done God's work. I should have thrown it back. Instead, I took it. The bills smelled like diesel and sin. Later, I found myself in a motel outside El Paso, staring at the mirror. The man looking back wore the same uniform I once thought sacred, only now the badge was gone, and the eyes belonged to someone else. I poured whiskey into the sink and whispered, "Forgive me, Eli." But forgiveness doesn't answer back from glass. Weeks passed. I couldn't tell if I was still working for Luis's mercy routes or Ramiro's trade routes. Maybe both. Maybe neither. I'd blurred the lines so deeply that even God would need a map to find me. One night, the convoy got ambushed. Not by coyotes, but by another patrol. I froze in the driver's seat, hearing the sirens rise like judgment. Ramiro shouted, guns drawn. Shots cracked through the dark, small, panicked thunder. A bullet hit the sand inches from my door. I ducked, blood pounding in my ears. When the shooting stopped, I saw one of the smugglers on the ground, dead. Another ran. The rest vanished into the night. I left the truck there and walked for hours until dawn, miles away, hands still shaking. That morning I went to the church. It was empty. Father Luis was gone. Only a single candle burned at the altar. I sat in the back pew and waited for silence to become language. "You're still alive," I whispered to myself. But what for? Then came the visit. A woman from Internal Affairs, Agent Carter, knocked on my door 2 days later. Clean suit, tired eyes. "We're reopening the Turner case," she said. "New intel suggests his route was compromised." "You were his partner, right?" I nodded. My throat burned. "Any idea who leaked the patrol maps?" I lied. "None." She studied me, long enough to make me sweat, then said, "Guilt makes people sloppy, Agent Reyes. Be careful." That word, agent, felt foreign now, like a rank I'd lost in another life. That night, I drank until the desert blurred into sound. I thought about turning myself in, but sin, once it's made a home inside you, doesn't leave quietly. It rearranges the furniture. I drove out again. One last run, I told myself. For closure. The same lie mercy always tells before dying. Ramiro met me near the ridge, same spot where Eli fell years ago. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. "After tonight, I'm done." He laughed. "No one's ever done, Santo." The convoy moved silently. This time, no families, just crates. Too heavy for mercy, too quiet for innocence. Halfway through, headlights appeared behind us. Border Patrol, full force. Ramiro shouted, "Go!" I floored the gas. The van roared across the sand, bullets sparking against metal. The desert lit up in flashes, white, gold, red. I could hear Eli's name between gunshots. Then the engine died. I stumbled out, raised my hands. The sky split open with sirens and dust. When they searched the van, they found what I already knew: bricks of cocaine, weapons, cash. Not a single human soul to save. They detained me overnight. No charges at first, under review. They didn't know the full story, only fragments. Someone higher up pulled strings. Maybe Father Luis, maybe the coyotes, maybe God, just for irony's sake. When they released me, I drove to the church again. Luis was waiting this time. He didn't look surprised. "You wanted to play savior," he said quietly, "but salvation doesn't come through shortcuts." I laughed, hollow. "Tell that to the families I helped." He sighed. "And to the ones you hurt?" I couldn't answer. That night, I sat outside under the stars, the rosary in one hand, the folded note from Maria in the other. Mercy shouldn't make you cruel. The words cut deeper than any bullet. I looked toward the border lights flickering in the distance. Each bulb glowed like a confession no one would ever hear. Somewhere out there, people were still crossing, still risking everything for a better life. And here I was, a man who tried to help them and became another obstacle instead. The saint had fallen. The desert didn't care. They say addiction is the inability to stop doing something that hurts you. Mercy, for me, had become exactly that. By the time Maria left for good, I didn't try to stop her. She took Mateo and went north. She didn't say goodbye, just left the rosary on the table where her note used to be. I stared at it until sunrise. The beads caught the morning light like broken halos. And for the first time, I didn't pray. They didn't charge me at first. They just watched. Unmarked cars on the street, a knock at midnight that wasn't there when I opened the door, phone calls that hung up after one ring. That's how guilt operates once you've invited it in. It doesn't shout, it stalks. I went back to work for a while, assigned to administrative duty at headquarters, filing reports about the very border I'd corrupted. Each document was a mirror I couldn't face. Patrol summaries, arrest logs, fatalities. Names I might have saved. Others I'd led to slaughter. Agent Carter passed my desk one afternoon. "Still praying, Reyes?" she asked, not looking up. "Still investigating," I replied. She smiled without humor. "Always." That was the game now. Silence for survival. Sleep vanished. The nights were longer than the desert. Every dream replayed the same scene. Eli's face under the moonlight, whispering my name like a verdict. I stopped going to church. Even God felt like surveillance. 2 months after the ambush, Internal Affairs called me back in. They'd found surveillance footage, the van, the desert, the chase. "You were there," Carter said. "Why didn't you report it?" I panicked. "Or participated." The room shrank. My voice, too. I was trying to help. Her eyes flickered. Pity or disgust, I couldn't tell. "Help who, Reyes?" the families, or yourself? They suspended me without pay. Pending further investigation. A phrase that sounds temporary until you realize it means forever. I sold my truck to pay rent. The silence in my home was unbearable, so I filled it with static. The radio, the TV, anything to drown out my own heartbeat. Then came the letter. It wasn't from the bureau. It was from Maria. Mateo asks about you. I tell him you're working in heaven's waiting room, checking papers at the gate. Maybe one day you'll believe that too. I read it until the words blurred into something mercifully unreadable. The next week, Father Luis visited. He didn't knock. He never did. He stood in the doorway, holding a small bag of groceries. "You've lost weight," he said. "I'm losing everything." He nodded. "That's how the desert purifies." "Then why does it feel like drowning?" He placed the bag on the table. Inside was bread, soup, and the rosary Maria left behind. "You can't feed on guilt forever, Daniel. You'll starve your soul." I looked up. "You think souls like mine survive?" "Only if they confess." So I tried. I wrote letters to Eli's widow, to Maria, to the families I'd helped. Most were never sent. Some came back stamped undeliverable. Each letter began the same way. "Forgive me for confusing compassion with control." I filled a notebook like that, page after page, words without response. It's strange. Confession without absolution becomes just another addiction. One night, I went back to the border fence, the same place it all began. The air was colder now, the wind sharper. On the American side, a patrol light blinked rhythmically, like a heartbeat too slow to save anyone. I stood there for hours, listening to the whispers of those crossing, the quiet shuffling of feet, the muted prayers, the breath of fear and hope mingled. I didn't stop them. I couldn't. Maybe I wanted them to see me, a ghost in uniform. But no one looked. No one ever does. The border moves on. The guilty stay behind. By winter, my suspension became termination. They called it breach of protocol, not betrayal. Official language makes sin sound bureaucratic. I pawned the last of my gear, my badge, my watch, Eli's knife. The shopkeeper didn't ask questions. The desert teaches discretion. I started working security at a warehouse near El Paso, night shifts mostly. A paycheck, a uniform, and the illusion of purpose. But each time someone passed through the door, I'd glance at their eyes, searching for recognition, judgment, forgiveness, anything. All I ever found was indifference. Then one evening, the warehouse caught fire. Faulty wiring, they said. Everyone got out except one man, a new worker, undocumented, trapped behind a steel door jammed by heat. I ran back in. The smoke clawed at my lungs. I found him, barely conscious, pounding weakly. I pulled him free, dragged him outside, collapsed on the gravel. The medics said we both got lucky, but I knew better. It wasn't luck. It was irony. The first life I saved since Eli was another illegal crossing in reverse. After the fire, something changed. I started volunteering again, quietly this time, No routes, no maps. Just helping at the church soup line, cleaning pews, fixing leaks. Father Luis didn't mention the past. He didn't have to. Silence had become our shared confession. One night he said, "You can't unburn the desert, Daniel. But you can plant in the ashes." That stuck with me. So I planted small things, gestures no one noticed. Fixing a broken lock at the shelter, driving a sick child to the clinic, standing outside during storms so others could stay dry. I wasn't seeking redemption. I'd stopped believing in that. I just didn't want mercy to die completely with me. Months later, I visited Eli's grave. A plain white stone, nothing fancy. Just his name, rank, and a date that divided our lives. I knelt, placed the rosary on the ground, and whispered, "You were right, partner." We weren't saving them. We were saving ourselves. The wind answered with dust. That's as close as forgiveness gets in the desert. Afterward, I drove aimlessly. No destination, no radio. Somewhere near the highway, I saw a group of migrants walking along the road, headlights catching their faces in fragments. I pulled over, rolled down the window. A man approached cautiously. "Agua?" he asked. I handed him the bottle beside me. He smiled, the same tired gratitude I'd seen 100 times before. Then his little boy peeked out from behind his leg, eyes wide. He looked at me, then at the fence in the distance, and said, "You help us cross?" I shook my head slowly. "Not anymore." The father nodded, understanding more than I said. As they walked away, I whispered the only prayer I still remembered. "May your mercy be cleaner than mine." That night, I went home and opened the notebook again. On the last page, I wrote, "The border was never between nations. It was between mercy and vanity." Then I closed it. Because sometimes, ending the story is the only confession left. I didn't confess to the government. I confessed to the one place that still let me walk in without scanning me: the church. It was a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of slow day when even God seems to rest. The sun was leaking through the stained glass windows, washing the empty pews in tired colors. I stood at the back for a long time, cap in hand, feeling like a child about to admit to breaking something sacred. Father Luis was sitting near the altar, reading. He looked up before I spoke, like he'd been waiting. "You've been gone," he said. "I've been hiding." "From who?" I swallowed. "From the version of me you think I am." He closed the book gently. "Then sit, Daniel. Let that man die." I sat 2 pews from him, not next to him. Guilt always leaves a seat between you and grace. "I need to tell you what I did," I said. Luis nodded. "Then tell it like you'd tell God. Without shortcuts." So I did. I told him about the first family, the father asking for water, the girl with fever, my flashlight in the dark. I told him how good it felt, how holy. Then I told him about the second crossing, the third, the ones I didn't vet, the men who weren't running from danger but delivering it, the convoy, the weapons, the cocaine. The night Eli died because the route I'd opened had become a hunting trail. I didn't dress it up. I didn't say mistakes. I said, I made a path for killers. When I finished, Luis wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the crucifix, jaw tight. Finally, he said, "So that's what's been burning you." "It was mercy," I said, voice shaking. "At least at first. I wanted to save people." He turned to me sharply. "You wanted to be the one who saves people." That cut deeper than any accusation. "Even God," he continued, "doesn't save everyone through you. Sometimes you were supposed to stand aside. You didn't." "That's pride, not compassion," I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him about the girl who lived, the mother who crossed, the boy who now plays soccer in Phoenix because of my route. I wanted to stack those lives like sandbags against the flood of my guilt. But the math didn't work anymore. "Eli is dead," I whispered, "because I thought I could play God." Luis studied me. "Do you want forgiveness, Daniel?" "I don't know if I deserve it." "That's not what I asked." Silence. The fan overhead clicked a tired rhythm. "I want to stop hearing the shot," I said. "That's not forgiveness," he said, voice softening. "That's relief." I let that sink in, because he was right. I didn't want to be forgiven so I could be better. I wanted to be forgiven so I could sleep. "Then what is forgiveness?" I asked. He leaned back, eyes closing. "It's when you stop arguing with the truth." Later that week, he asked me to meet someone. I thought it would be a therapist or another priest, maybe even an officer. It wasn't. It was Eli's wife. Her name was Hannah, and I'd written her 3 letters I never sent. Now she was sitting across from me in a small church office, hands folded, eyes red. Not from fresh tears, but the kind you carry for years. Luis said, "You both carry the same ghost. You should stop doing it alone." Then he left us. The room was too small for that kind of pain. I cleared my throat. "Hannah, She lifted a hand. "I know who you are." Her voice wasn't angry. That made it worse. "Agent Carter came by months ago," she said. "Said Eli's route might have been leaked." I asked who had access. Your name came up. I felt the floor tilt. "You knew?" I whispered. "I suspected." She stared at the table. "But suspicion isn't healing." My mouth was dry. I opened that route. I thought it was for families. They used it, those men. I didn't know it was that night. I didn't know they'd be armed. I didn't... "Yes," she said quietly. "You didn't know." I nodded, tears burning now. "But I should have." She let out a breath that sounded like a decade. "Do you love my husband, Daniel?" The question stunned me. "What?" "You talk about him like he's still your partner. Like you still want his approval. Do you love him?" I stared at the crucifix on the wall. "He was the better one." She nodded. "He was. But he wasn't perfect either. He talked about you, you know. Said you had too much heart for the job." I laughed bitterly. "That heart got him killed." "No," she said firmly. "The men who pulled the trigger got him killed." Your mercy made it easier, maybe, but it didn't fire the gun. I felt something crack inside. Not healed, but loosened. Because I'd been carrying the whole bullet, like I forged it, loaded it, fired it. But sin is rarely that clean. It's usually shared. I came here, I said, voice small, because I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. And I came, she said, eyes wet now, because I wanted to hear you say it. Silence again, but this time softer. I'm sorry, Hannah, I said, the words finally naked. I thought I was saving people. I thought I was doing good, but I was feeding something in me. I was proud, and your husband, he paid. Now she was crying, quiet, tired sobs. I miss him every day, she whispered. But I won't spend the rest of my life hating the men who made mistakes. I save that for the men who meant it. I swallowed. I didn't mean it. I know. Does that change anything? She wiped her face. It changes what I call you. Not murderer, just sinner. I almost laughed. In the desert, that's promotion. She stood up, walked to the door, then turned. Do something with it, she said. Don't waste his death on self-punishment. That's just pride in rags. Then she left. I sat there a long time, listening to the dust move. After that, I started telling the truth in pieces. Not to the government, the system had all it needed. To the people who mattered. I told Maria on the phone. I helped people cross, I said, and bad people used it. Eli died because of it. On the other end, silence. Then, I knew it was something like that, she said. You looked like a man carrying a secret bigger than his paycheck. I never meant to hurt anyone. I believe you, she said, but intention doesn't bring Mateo his godfather back. I winced. Does he hate me? He misses you, she said, but he's learning from you. From me? Yes. A pause. He's learning what happens when mercy forgets wisdom. That one stayed with me. Confession didn't erase consequences. It just made them honest. I still lost my career. I still lost my marriage. I still carried Eli's name like a stone in my chest. But after telling Hannah, after telling Maria, something strange happened. The gunshot in my dreams got quieter. Not gone, just less sharp. Less like judgment, more like memory. I realized then what Father Luis meant. Forgiveness isn't magic. It's volume control. Around that time, the church started getting more visitors. Migrants, yes, but also agents, ex-military, people like me who'd made choices in gray zones and were now drowning in what if. Luis asked me to talk to them. Why me? I said. I'm the bad example. He smiled. Exactly. Clean people can't teach mercy. Only people who misused it can. So I sat with them. A young agent who'd lied on a report to protect a friend. A woman who married a man for papers and then fell in love with someone else. A coyote who wanted to get out but didn't know how without being killed. I didn't preach. I just said what I'd learned. Mercy without boundaries becomes vanity. Good intentions don't cancel real harm. Secrets always cash themselves in. Guilt isn't a home, it's a hallway. Walk through it. Sometimes I saw in their eyes what I once felt. That rush of, I can fix this. So I always ended with, no, you can't fix it. But you can stop adding to it. That's confession, I think. Not erasing the past, refusing to extend its shadow. One Sunday after service, a little boy came up to me, maybe 7, maybe 8. Brown hair, dusty shoes. He stared at my face like he was trying to remember it. "You work here?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Sort of." "You used to be police?" Kids always say police for any uniform. "Yeah," I said again. "Sort of." He nodded, satisfied. "My dad said you helped us cross. He said to tell you, gracias." I froze. His father, a man I didn't recognize, stood near the door watching. Our eyes met. His weren't angry, weren't pleading, just grateful. And in that moment, I felt the full, terrible complexity of what I'd done. Because both things were true. I had helped, and I had harmed. Confession wasn't choosing one story. It was holding both without lying. That night, I walked behind the church, to the border of the property where the chain-link fence met open desert. The moon lit up the sand in pale silver. In the distance, I could see the taller border wall glowing under floodlights. The country's confession line, still rising. I spoke out loud, not sure to whom. "I was wrong," I said. I called it compassion. But I wanted to feel powerful. I wanted to feel necessary. I wanted to fix what wasn't mine. The wind tugged at my shirt. "I can't pay it back," I said. "Not all of it. Not Eli. Not the drugs that came through. Not Maria's trust. Not Mateo's childhood picture of me." I closed my eyes. But I can spend what's left of me on cleaner mercy. When I opened them, nothing had changed. The wall was still there. The desert was still dry. Eli was still dead. But inside, the screaming had dropped to a murmur. Mornings come earlier now, not because I wake better, but because guilt never learned how to sleep. The church sits 3 blocks from the border road, just close enough to hear trucks rattle by. From the doorway, I can see the line of steel and light that divides countries, but never humanity. It looks smaller from here, almost gentle. I work the security shift, though everyone knows it's just a polite title for man who stays behind to lock the doors. I check the gates, fix the bulbs, sweep the steps. Sometimes I help migrants carry their duffels to the shelter next door. I don't tell them who I was. They see it anyway. The stance, the habit of scanning perimeters, the eyes that measure exits. You can't unlearn vigilance. You just repurpose it. One Sunday, a boy about Mateo's age walked up after Mass. He asked, "Are you the man who opens the church at night?" I said, "Yes." He nodded. "Then you open the right doors." Simple words, but they hit like a hymn. Because once I opened doors for the wrong reasons. For pride, for pity, for control. Now I open one that creaks with forgiveness, even if it's not mine. Father Luis sometimes joins me on the front steps in the evenings. He doesn't preach anymore. We just watch the light fade over the desert. "You're quieter these days," he says. "I used to fill silence with excuses," I tell him. "Now I just let it breathe." He smiles. "Then maybe you're finally listening." We sit there a while, watching a family cross the road, hand in hand, heading north. He murmurs, "Still think mercy was a mistake?" I shake my head. Mercy wasn't the mistake. Ownership was. At night, when the last visitor leaves, I lock the church and stay by the back door, the one that opens to the desert. The air smells of dust and faint rain. Sometimes I hear footsteps out there, far away, the shuffle of travelers, the murmured prayers in Spanish, the quiet bravery of survival. And sometimes, in the mix of wind and breath, I imagine Eli's voice again. Not accusing this time, just present, just human. Maybe that's forgiveness. When the voice that haunted you starts sounding like company. I still keep the notebook. The first half is confession. The second half is blank. Every week, I write a single line in it, not as penance, but as practice. I guarded borders once. Now I guard doors. The desert remembers what mercy forgets. Forgiveness is not a finish line. It's a place you return to when you run out of lies. Sometimes Maria calls. Her voice is calm now, not wounded. We talk about Mateo, how he's studying criminology, of all things. He says he wants to do it right, she laughs, without forgetting the human part. That's when I know the circle's closed. Not perfectly, but enough to stand on without sinking. I tell her, tell him not to chase redemption, just decency. She says, he already learned that from you. The line goes quiet after that. Some silences don't hurt. They heal. On my days off, I drive along the old patrol road. Most of it's fenced now, thicker, higher, crowned with sensors. But the arroyo where it all began is still there. The sand has shifted, but not erased. Nothing in the desert truly disappears. It just waits for wind to reveal it again. I kneel there sometimes, whispering small prayers that don't have names. Not to be forgiven, just to stay awake. Because staying awake, that's the only promise I can still keep. People think confession ends with words. It doesn't. It ends with work. Quiet, repetitive work that rebuilds what you once broke. So I sweep the floor. I light the candles. I open the door when someone knocks at midnight. Tired, frightened, desperate. They walk past me into the glow of the church. Sometimes they thank me. Sometimes they don't. It doesn't matter anymore. Because mercy, I've learned, isn't something you give. It's something you guard. So it doesn't die in your absence. The border fence still hums every night, miles away. But here, inside the church gates, there's another border. Invisible, soft, alive. It's where the guilty meet the broken, where the saved remember the lost, where even silence sounds like prayer. And every evening, as I watch another stranger cross that line, I whisper the only thing left that feels true. Welcome home. Mercy without wisdom breeds ruin. But even ruin, when faced honestly, can learn how to serve.